Hey everybody, and welcome to the Matt Kins Show. I'm your host, Matt Kins. It's November 23rd, 2020, and do you know where your ideology is? Nah, I'm just kidding. Uh, Things are crazy in the world today, and the mainstream media has just become, or the corporate press, whatever you want to call them, just these talking floating heads in your TV screen who are generally atrocious, awful people. They're losing credibility left and right. They're losing credibility because for the last however many years, you can go back as far as you want, but they've just been lying and spewing propaganda and just ridiculous nonsense. And we saw that, especially during the election coverage of Trump in 2020, the coverage of that election between him and Biden, where uh, the media just called it for Biden way ahead of when it should have been called, whether you like Trump or not. If you really believe in fair elections, this whole election fiasco should be raising your hackles. It should be making you kind of nervous. Now, the left wing of America railed against Trump, and this includes the mainstream media. They railed against Trump for the last 4 years, hating his guts and hitting him with all kinds of crazy charges and conspiracy theories. And now that the result, now that the media is calling the election for Biden, they think that it's all fine, and they really don't want to talk about any election interference whatsoever because it's not convenient to their narrative. And this is the awful thing about politics is most people have the attention span of a fruit fly. And so now it's basically whatever the media is jamming in your face at any given time is what they want you to hear, what they want you to believe, but it's all bullshit. Um, Now, the fact that there was a lot of fishiness with this election, not only from like the votes being cast, but just how social media and everybody has been social media and the corporate press, like big tech and the corporate press, how they've been handling it. First of all, during the coverage of the election and post, so you could talk about like pre-election, like when basically for the last since 2016 corporate press and social media have been getting way more radically left wing and trying to push the Overton window, which is kind of the boundaries of the conversation. They're trying to push that Overton window way over so that we're only talking about little, like a tiny little portion of the conversation. And it's kind of like arguing over where to put the deck chairs as the Titanic sinks. So we've seen this increasingly insane vitriol, racist vitriol against whites and whiteness or whatever. It's enough to make your head spin if you get on and try to read these pseudo intellectual, they're not intellectuals, these hucksters, these um, creeps and weirdos and losers who have no real talent or ability, and they just want to get on board with this hating on white people. And no matter if you're judging someone based upon their skin color, you're a racist. And so all this anti-white rhetoric is extremely dangerous and racist. But just like if the injustice is like on your side, people don't care. So if racism is happening against black people, oh, liberals scream it's the worst thing in the world. And if there's not a lot of racism happening against black people, let's make it up. But if there's racism against white people, that's the best thing ever. So, again, no principle there, no ethics, just this insane whirlwind of insanity to try to just get people whipped up into a nonsensical frenzy. It's gaslighting, which is a term I hate, and gaslighting is ironically a term used on the left for many, many years as to make like it's when someone is making you feel insane, when someone is deliberately changing their story and telling you crazy shit so that you feel insane. That's what gaslighting is. And that's exactly what's happening now. We had the last 4 years of people saying the election was rigged, the election was rigged, the election was rigged. And now that there was another election that went in their favor, well, there's no problem. No reason to look into anything. And the corporate press is really diverting a lot of attention away from what's going on right now. You can't deny that that election night thing was fishy when Trump was leading in all these states. and then boom, they stop the counting for days sometimes. And no, I'm not a Trump voter, uh, but the I think that liberalism and leftism is a disease. Yeah, it's a creepy cultural virus that makes people insane, and I hate it. And the reason I hate it is because it distracts people away from living lives in an actual life living manner. Like, instead of saying, all right, I'm going to build my life and do my thing, it's, well, I'm a victim and I need confirmation or money or power handed to me because I was such a victim. And this is essentially what liberalism and leftism is this playing this victim card and trying to get power instead of actually living a human life. And that's a game that doesn't work if everybody plays it. And my take on modern politics is that everybody's a liberal, everybody's a progressive, including the Republican Party. They argue it's we're on this raft and it's floating downstream or upstream or whatever. It's floating to the left, and conservatives are just sort of arguing about how that's a bad thing instead of paddling the other way. So yeah, conservatives are progressives and liberals. And if you don't believe me, take the war on drugs. The war on drugs is an extremely progressive undertaking. It's this idea that big government should have a say in what people do with their own bodies in the privacy of their own home. That's extremely progressive, saying that it's basically thought crime. It's this idea that you want to control your own mind, but you're not allowed. And if we catch you with these substances, that's proof that you're trying to control your own mind, and thus you are in need of some jail time, or you need to just get ground through the system or whatever. So, where was I going? Oh my gosh, I lost it. So yeah, again, this whole war on drugs is just progressive because it's saying, oh, our communities are the victims of these outsiders, and we need to give the government more power to regulate it and interfere with people's personal lives instead of saying, hey, drug use is a personal choice, and it's one that even if we don't agree with it, um, it's a personal freaking choice, and that's what it boils down to. So the progressives and the conservatives and the liberals or whatever in American politics, the Republicans, the Democrats, they're all progressives. They're all trying to gain power by feeding power into this giant governing machine. And it is evil. And that was a little bit of a rant there, and I kind of forgot where I was going. Um, let's get back to the election because I totally lost my train of thought. So this election was the way that the votes were counted, the way that the media covered it, all fraudulent. And then before that, let's talk about kind of Twitter's banning of the Hunter Biden story, where say what you will about the crack addiction and the freaky sex, because again, I'm not a progressive. I don't care if you want to smoke crack and have freaky sex, as long as it's involving completely consensual adults on your own private property. Whatever, I'm not going to do it, but I'm also not going to call for government to stop people from doing it. But what happened here was there was evidence of massive fraud of the Biden family using their political power to get money and power and influence in Ukrainian fossil fuel industry. And that is straight up corruption. There's no way that you can say that, like, Hunter Biden doesn't speak Ukrainian. He doesn't know anything about oil. So why is he getting this powerful seat with this oil company? And so it's obvious to peddle influence. Sorry, dogs are get out of here. Dogs are being ridiculous. Yeah, the dangers of amateur media production. Got my hair messed up. I just woke up. Got my dogs making a bunch of noise. But that just shows you I'm real, folks. There's nobody paying me or pulling my strings. There's nobody paying me, obviously. I can't even afford a picture for my wall. Anyway, um, so yeah, the Twitter's canceling of that story really showed a dangerous bias of big tech towards left wing. And as we've seen, this has been happening all throughout the last 4 years. I really wasn't paying a ton of attention before, um, but the Twitter's crackdown on right wing figures, all of social media's this. I mean, you want to talk about a monopoly, corporate monopoly that's in bed with the government. Big tech, man. All of our conversations have kind of flowed onto a handful of websites, and not 100% of the time, but there's a general understanding in American culture that Facebook, Twitter are where all of the big cultural conversations happen. And then the fact that the people who run those will happily censor posts or shadow ban or outright kick people off the platform altogether shows that this is a dangerous concentration of power and we got to get away from it. So the fact that a week before the election they squashed this story that basically proved, um, and again, I'm not worried about Hunter Biden being gross or doing weird shit. Charlie Sheen did the same stuff, and I saw him on a YouTube ad, which I can't believe that any advertiser would want Charlie Sheen as a face of their product, but apparently they do because they know Americans have about this much attention span. Um, so Twitter did that. One thing they also did, I haven't checked the news this morning, but one thing they did a couple days ago was they said, okay, January 20th, we're giving the official President of the United States Twitter handle to Biden. Now, this is kind of crazy for a couple of reasons. First, uh, I didn't know that Twitter had an official President of the United States Twitter handle. I know that Trump uses @RealDonaldTrump. But the fact that this social media company uh, is going to make is going to have a title like that and make that call as to who gets it, it's just more insane corporate interference in the election. Um, because again, this all, I'm not, frankly, I hate democracy. I don't think that stupid people should have a say in my life. And if you think that people aren't that stupid, as George Carlin said, think of the dumbest person you know. Think about how dumb the average person is, and remember half of people are dumber than that. So this idea that democracy is a good thing isn't necessarily true. Because if you think about it, if we democratize like food, like what we eat for dinner every night, well, we'd all be having McDonald's because it's the most popular restaurant in the country. If we all, um, I don't know, just think about how just gross and dirty and sloppy and unpleasant Americans are, and think why somehow is that a magical thing when they all get together and make a decision. Because the fact is you don't most people don't even know enough to what to do when their car breaks down. They take it to a mechanic. What are we going to vote on what mechanic you take your car to because we like him and he's got a nice public campaign? um, do you understand what I'm saying? It's this myth of authority where government doesn't really have actual authority over your life. Well, they do in the sense that they have this violent machine that will crush you if you don't comply. But the fact that just a bunch of people voted for these people and now we call it government and now the decisions they make are somehow legitimate, it's not legit, it's not real, it's not true, it's fake, it's made up. And this is something that's pounded into your head through 12 years of government run indoctrination camps, aka school. um, so I know I'm sounding like a little bit fringy, a little bit lunatic here. I guess maybe depending on what you listen to, kind of what media figures you listen to, if any, or what kind of independent thinking you do. But the fact is, in 2016, I was a Bernie bro. I didn't vote. But I was a Bernie bro. I was super left wing, and I really thought, yeah, Medicare for all, healthcare for all, free college, all this crap. I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. And in the last 4 years, as the left wing push to dominate every aspect of conversation and culture in our society has really made me do a backflip and start looking in the other direction. Because when you get up and close and personal to a lot of these, to the results of what brings these regulations bring around in the culture, you see how ugly and monstrous it is. It's nasty stuff. So I used to be an even Bernie bro, and then in the last 4 years, I have completely flipped, and I've become just a real big supporter of individual rights. And and so I just feel the need to point out why I made that change and the crazy things that I've been seeing. And again, I'm not a Republican or a conservative because American Republicans and conservatives are just progressives going a little slower down the river. There's no real conversation in our government about significantly increasing individual rights or decreasing the role of government in any capacity. It's just politicians are never going to give you an answer that doesn't involve them. And so that's why political solutions are kind of ridiculous and don't are never going to lead to actual people getting along and progress. Progressivism is the opposite of progress. It really is, because progress doesn't happen at the point of a gun. It doesn't happen through government institutions. It happens through free interactions between free people. So this fact that the left wing has gone so crazy and so overboard in the last 4 years has just been an eye-opener for me. And it should be for you too, if you have any sort of sense or desire to live an actual real life. You should be really nervous about this right now. And the fact that Trump, and again, he hasn't lost. He has not conceded this race. And there's a lot of, um, there's a lot of sketchy things that happened during the election that should raise a lot of people hackles because, again, progressives, left-wingers, they don't care about fairness. They just want to win. And they think that, oh, well, if they call the system fair and if they win, they'll call the system fair. If they lose, they'll call the system rigged. They won, so they're calling it fair. But what's going to happen the next time there's a big electoral dispute? It's going to be rigged again. And you just, if you actually stop to pay attention to these people, you just start to see how full of crap they are, and you get really disgusted by it. And then when you actually hear someone telling the truth, it's so refreshing because I think on a visceral level, it's very disquieting to the human mind when you see something happen that's disturbing and people react as if it's normal. Like if you were walking down, like when I lived in Los Angeles, and thank God I got out of that hellhole. I'll probably talk a lot about that in the future as to why it was such an awful place to live. One reason was the blatant crime and homelessness and kind of the intermingling of the two. Not necessarily, because there's a lot of organized crime there. Um, and I don't just mean the government. uh, there's a lot of, hold on. Stop it! There's a lot of organized crime in LA, and there's a lot of homelessness, and it's really expensive, and nothing ever really gets done despite the fact that you're paying these people lots and lots of money. Uh, anyway, so I'm getting off on another tangent. So what again? My point was when you see something happen that's disturbing and people react in a way that you're that's even more disturbing than the thing. It changes your mindset greatly. There's an old saying that a conservative is a liberal who got mugged, and I would say absolutely that's pretty accurate. You could break that down and say, well, liberals do generally live in this pie in the sky world. And again, they'll just like with the election, they'll if they don't like something, they'll paint it as corrupt and unfair, and if they like something, they'll paint it as pure and truthful. But for the most part, is they're just full of shit, and they want to push through these policies. Um, Democrats in particular that basically just straight up buy votes. Like that's why the Democrats are so linked with public sector unions and expanding public sector unions, minus the police unions usually. No, in some cities, I guess. Because again, I think in the average person's mind, like, oh, if you're a conservative or Republican, you're on the right. If you're a Democrat or liberal, you're on the left. That's not true. The conservatives and Republicans are on the left too. Um, and the Democrats and the liberals are authoritarian uh, progressives, right? They being progressive doesn't mean you're peaceful. It's quite the opposite. Being progressive means you have to point guns in people's faces and throw them in cages and burn down their um, villages and cities in order to get your point across. That's progressivism. So, uh, God, I'm off on all these tangents today. Anyway, being in LA and seeing the really high level of crime and the low level of standard of living that is afforded to all the people out there. And same with like New York City, maybe pre 9/11. You just walk around and you see crime and things that shouldn't be happening everywhere, all the time. You see it with your own eyes, you hear about it from other people, you read it about it in the media. And some people, I get desensitized to it, and I understand in the same way that like there's a lot of overweight and unhealthy people in America. I think that obesity and lack of physical health is a reflection on your mental state. And because if you are not willing to get up every day and actually eat healthy food and get blood and oxygen flowing through your body, you're definitely not doing that with your mind. And so I do understand how this happens. And I think it's awful and I think it's horrible. And just like when you get to a point of physical health, you may encounter something in your life where you like start eating crappy and exercise less and drinking more or whatever, but you're always going to have this feeling that okay, well this isn't right and maybe I'm going through something, but I know the direction is to get back up and get moving again. It's the same thing with your mental state, but there are some people who are so weighed down with the ridiculous crap in their mind that they will you don't see it, you don't know it. And with the physical body, at least there's something you can look at and say, well, I want to lose this weight. But with your mental mind, you're just never going to know how clogged up your brain is with stupid fucking bullshit. And that's ideas or chemicals or whatever. Anyway, so driving around living in LA for these years, you start to see things that everyone just seems to take as normal. Oh, yeah, there's like a bunch of people living under a bridge. Oh, that guy just got stabbed. Oh, like, yep, that hill over there is on fire. That's weird. Um, you know, and you look around and you're like, well, no one else is freaking out, so I guess I shouldn't. But the smart person, the thinker, looks around and says, just because all these other people don't see how dangerous it is, doesn't mean it's not dangerous. It's like the emperor's new clothes. Like all these people are clapping, oh, California is such a bastion of greatness. Oh, there's all these homeless people and fires, and it's just too expensive for anyone to live. Um, but it's great because we said so, because we have tofu and sunshine and palm trees. Well, that might work for like a young kid or somebody who's extremely naive, but like a real thinking person who gets in that scenario is going to over time start to look at that and say, this is really dangerous and I could really get hurt, um, and leave. And just like how there's people, and so I guess I'll bring this back. I'm not making a ton of sense. You can see my hair. I just woke up. I wanted to get a morning podcast in before I head out for the day. Um, but a lot of people who have an ounce of common sense are going to look at that and say, this is really bad. And this isn't a place for me. Even if you like California, okay, think about buying a house there. First of all, buying a house in LA is going to cost you $1 million. And then second of all, once you own that property, you are on the hook for whatever debt that government incurs or whatever projects they want to finance. So California they are just broke right now. They're really broke because of all these pensions, and a pension is basically a promise for the future. So if you're hiring cops or teachers or garbage men or firefighters, you can say, okay, we're going to give you this salary now, but in 50 years when you retire, we're going to give you a bunch of money too. And this is a really easy way for politicians to create government programs while actually not paying for them, and but promising that a future generation will pay for them. And this is why it's very disturbing that the U.S. debt is in. I mean, it's an astronomical number, because essentially, as a U.S. citizen, these politicians are borrowing that money with the promise that you will pay it back. And here's the thing about buying the house in California, which is kind of a microcosm, which is why when Kamala Harris said California is a model state, it really freaked me out because it's a terrible place to live. Oh my God. If you haven't gotten out, get out. Um, because once California is in all this debt and owes money to all these people, and you own a little physical piece of California, and they say, hey, time's up. Now it's time for you to start paying these promises that we made. You didn't even make them. We made them on your behalf. Now it's time for you to start paying up. And you're saying, well, no, I didn't promise like all these people they could have pensions, or I didn't borrow all this money to build a light speed rail or do this or that. Well, too bad. Taxes are raised, and if you can't pay them, we're going to seize your property. And oh, I'll just sell my property. Who's going to buy your property? At that point, who's going to buy property there? No. So it's essentially a hostage game. So that is why big government spending is really, really bad. And I guess I can go off on another tangent here. If it wasn't for the Federal Reserve printing money and manipulating interest rates, we would actually have to raise taxes to pay in cash for the things we wanted to happen. But just like somebody with a credit card, but with like a high credit card allowance, but a little bit of income, um, you can buy a bunch of shit you can't really afford. And yeah, it'll suck down the road when you're paying tons of interest per month on your balance, and you don't even have enough to like keep the balance at what it is, right? This is what's happening with big government spending. And if government actually had to come up and front the cash for these big things, there would be a lot less being done on that front, because taxes would have to go up and people would rebel. Government does all this sneaky shit all the time. They put in hidden fees and taxes and tickets, um, because they know that raising taxes is politically unpopular. So, well, except for the loony left, because lefties don't understand how numbers work or money works, because they're usually trust fund kids. Um, Holy fuck. I've just been ranting. God. Can I get a coherent thought out there? But anyway, yeah, that's what turned me from a leftist to just whatever I am now, is seeing all these things and just it imprinting into my brain for long enough and consistently enough that I decided it's absolute BS. And I think a lot of people are are making this transition, this movement. Uh, Ruben Report, whatever his name is, Ruben. No, I'm blanking. Ruben Report, Tim Pool, a lot of people, former lefties, who just said this is insane, and I'm not on board with this. And also, now Fox News viewers are ditching Fox. I mean, boom, gone. Except for I think Tucker Carlson's show. Fox News, since the election, their viewership has plummeted, and everybody's going over to Newsweek and or Newsmax, not Newsweek, Newsmax and OANN, um, because people are just sick of this bullshit narrative, and it's finally starting to sink in, and just like sometimes you just can't believe that someone would be so brazen. Like I think a lot of the times if you see that you're being robbed or you see like something going on in broad daylight, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe how brazen they are. They're just doing this illegal thing right there. And it's the same thing, I think, with the American public for the last 4 years. We've just been like, is this really happening? And then when this election hit, we're like, wow, this is really happening. And again, I'm no Trump supporter. I probably disagree with a lot of conservatives on a lot of things because again, they are just progressives. So of course I disagree with them on a lot of things. I disagree with the war on drugs. I disagree with the wars abroad. Um, and those are the primary two big things that I think show conservatives' true progressive nature is the war on drugs and the wars abroad. This idea that we need big government programs to like implement whatever we think is right, even if people don't want to. Well, we'll just kill them. And they'll see how right it is after the fact. We'll be proven on the right side of history or whatever. um, well, anyway, it's been just a little rant for today. Half an hour, that's pretty good for a solo show. So, yeah, take it easy, everybody. I'll be back with you pretty soon. All right, bye.